Next on KQED Newsroom, privatizing transit from buses to shuttles.
It's a perfect fit for me.
What's driving the trend? Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Private companies are changing the way many of us are getting to work. For years, Google, Facebook, and other firms have run shuttle buses to take their employees to and from their campuses. Now, some startups are getting into the transit business. In the past year, 3 new companies have begun offering some San Francisco commuters a faster way to work at more than twice the price of a Muni ride. Scott Schaefer checked out 2 of the new private transit options.
Everyone likes having options, right? Especially when it comes to your daily commute to work. This week, I checked out 2 new alternatives to San Francisco's Muni bus system, starting with the newest kid on the block, Leap. Leap launched its first bus route this week. So tell me how you found out about Leap.
I read an article on TechCrunch that was circulated around our office, and I got excited because I live in the marina and I hate the commute every morning. So yeah, it's a perfect fit for me. This is my first time. It's great so far. It's really comfortable, spacious, not hot like the 30X, which is what I usually take.
How long were you taking Muni? And what was that experience like?
Probably about a year, but I avoided it as much as I could. I took Uber a lot, but obviously with the prices that are, always surging, it became quite an expensive habit.
A ride costs $5 to $6, depending on how many tickets you buy, about double Muni fares. Leap's vehicles are refurbished buses. There's Wi-Fi and even a mini bar selling gourmet coffees, juices, and snacks. Leap's co-founder and CEO Kyle Kirchhoff rode with me on the company's only line, the Lombard route, which snakes its way from San Francisco's Marina neighborhood to downtown. Kirchhoff says he tried to completely rethink the commute experience. Do you see Muni as your competition?
We really love Muni, and we really like mass transit, and we think that that's a really important part of making a city work well. And we really view ourselves as a kind of a complementary service to help with some of the overflow, because right now commuters only have 2 major options to get to work.
But there's also this kind of tension in the city, with the Google buses, the Yahoo, the Genentech buses. Some people are saying that you're really creating a 2-tier transit system here for the haves and the have-nots.
Well, Google buses are private and only available to Google employees. At Leap, we're really focused on identifying the problem areas for commuters and enabling the community to give us feedback on where the mass transit infrastructure needs to be complemented, and we look forward to bringing, service to all areas of the city like Potrero and, Sunset and Richmond.
What about, San Francisco, of course, is a very regulatory intense place. What are some of the regulatory hurdles you've had to deal with?
We've collaborated closely with Muni to design a route that doesn't take us under restricted streets or get in the way of their operations. And we're really interested in looking at the broader network of transportation options available to commuters and make sure that we're doing things that make the city work better overall.
What about bus stops?
We primarily use white loading zones throughout the city to make sure that we don't get in the way of the city's operations.
So you're not using Muni stops?
No, we're not using Muni stops.
Kirchhoff says investors have kicked in $2.5 million to help launch Leap, but they've got a competitor just 2 blocks away, Chariot. Both companies mimic Muni's 30 Marina Express line. How do you think it's different from Muni, as for a driver, I mean?
As a driver, I think it's a lot better. We don't deal with, rude customers, things like that. People enjoy actually our service,
Using smaller vans, Chariot's Chestnut Bullet takes a slightly different route from Leap. Laura Champion has been riding Chariot for a few months. Yeah. And so in terms of comfort and all that, you're guaranteed a seat for one thing, right?
Yeah, it's great. And if a van is full, there's another one 5 minutes behind, so it's not like you're waiting, you're not on a packed bus. Yeah. You don't feel like you're a sardine packed inside, so it's nice. It's been a really big relief, actually, in a lot less stress commuting to work in the morning.
Yeah. Chariot has 3 other lines and, like Leap, is targeting a niche market, unlike Muni, with over 700,000 rides a day. It's like an industrial bakery versus a boutique cupcake shop. These private transit options clearly can't serve everyone. There's a company that's offering a app on the phone with an alternative to Muni. It's kind of
I would expect it to be more expensive.
So how often do you use public transit?
Every day. We take the Bart system from the East Bay, come out to San Francisco, and then I take the 38L or 38 regular down to Japantown.
What's that experience like?
Oh my, it's smooth. The transition is very smooth. I get off of Bart, I walk right out here, Montgomery, and I'm right on there, and I'm back in Japantown about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Smooth, really. I like it.
What's your take on Muni?
I mean, it's better than not having. It's better than not having any sort of way to get around the city. But sometimes, it can be a little frustrating with, people yelling and screaming and getting harassed on the bus.
Who knows? Maybe a little competition will force Muni to up its game.
And joining me now to discuss the benefits and drawbacks of private transit services are San Francisco Supervisor Scott Wiener, Clarrissa Cabansagan, a planner with Transform, a transportation advocacy organization, and Chariot founder and CEO Ali Vahabzadeh. Welcome to you all. Ali, let's begin with you. Your company is less than a year old. It provides 4,000 rides a week. Muni provides more than 700,000 rides per day. What niche is Chariot filling?
Well, we're focusing on the commute. So in San Francisco, like many cities in North America, if not the world, the peak hours, Monday through Fridays, mornings 7 to 10, evenings 4 to 7, 4 to 8 o'clock, are really people trying to do the right thing by doing transit first. And most transit systems aren't able to take the capacity of all the commuters trying to get either to work or to home at the time. So I'm not sure if it's a niche, but it's a large swath of the segment that we're addressing.
And right now you're in San Francisco. Do you have plans to extend beyond San Francisco?
We do. We think there's a lot of opportunity in San Francisco, and afterwards we want to look at the greater Bay Area and then eventually move on to a second market.
Okay. And Supervisor Wiener, you are a longtime Muni rider. You've done it for 18 years. Muni's on-time performance is 58%. It's supposed to be 85%. It has never met that goal. And people complain about Muni all the time. Do you think that the growth in these private transit systems are a reflection of Muni's failure?
The fact that we're seeing private alternatives to public transportation shows that we have not kept up as a region in investing in our transit systems. Our city has grown by 100,000 people in the last decade. The Bay Area is going to grow by 2 million people in the next 25 years. And BART and Muni and AC Transit and Caltrain are all bursting at the seams. You can't get onto vehicles at times. And that's because we have not invested at the level that we need to expand the capacity and reliability of the systems. And so as a result, we are seeing lots of alternatives, and that includes some of these private services. But just to be clear, even if we did everything we need to do with public transportation, if we really want to get people out of their cars, and we can't have another million cars in the Bay Area, we have to give people alternatives. To get people out of their cars, even with good transit, you have to have supplementary services, car sharing, ride sharing, and so forth.
So you support these new services coming along?
I support giving residents as many good non-car alternatives as possible, and that includes great public transportation and cabs, and it includes private services as well.
Clarrissa, what impact do you think these private services will have on the public transit system?
Mm-hmm. So at Transform, we really believe that you can't get ahead in life if you can't get around. And that means really dealing with the reality that we have currently a bifurcated system where there are people that can afford to drive everywhere and clog up our highways, which look more like parking lots if you've been on the 101 recently. And then there are those that have to take transit even if it's unreliable or it's not coming when you want it to come. Or bike or walk to get to your destination. So I think that the reality is that people want options, and these new options signal the need for for provision of options that people currently can't rely on the existing transportation network.
Well, but you use an interesting phrase, bifurcated system. Does this not also set up a different kind of bifurcated system in the sense that those who can afford to pay, for example, a $6 ride on Leap will be able to use these plush, posh services, and you create a further stratification between those who can afford that and those who can only afford a $2 Muni ride?
Yes, and so I think that what the private sector has been able to do well is find the gaps in the existing transportation network and actually capitalize on that. And you can decide whether or not that's a good thing, but it is getting people out of their cars per se if that is an option that is better than their own personal automobile. I think that where we really need to be careful is making sure that that type of technology and that advanced solution is inaccessible to low-income people. So are there ways that these companies can start to really think about the needs of lower-income people that currently are underserved by transit? There are a lot of people that own cars in places where transit is just not serving them well.
Well, we have the CEO of Chariot right here, the CEO of one of those companies.
Yeah.
Have you begun to think about that? How will you serve underserved communities?
Sure, we're really excited because with Chariot, customers are paying closer to $3 a ride rather than a $15 or $20 ride using Uber during surge pricing or Lyft during primetime pricing. So getting down to $3 is very close to Muni, in fact. On top of that, our customers can pay with Chariot passes with commuter benefits provided by their employers. So using those commuter benefits like WageWorks or Commuter Check, the same ones they would use on Muni, Caltrain, or Bart, our customers are paying for Chariot passes with pre-tax dollars. In other words, that's saving them anywhere from 30 to 50% off that $3.50 ride, for example. So on a commuter benefit basis, Chariot customers are paying closer to $2 a ride. That's really hard to beat.
But you have limited routes right now. I mean, you don't have any routes going into the Bayview Hunters Point, for example, or the Tenderloin. People who really can't afford to use something beyond Muni right now, many of them.
Sure. Well, we're really excited. We started with 4 vans, me driving one of them back in April. And now we're over 30 vans and 4 routes in just 11 months. So we're really excited to, we've just expanded to the Haight-Ashbury, and we hopefully look forward to serving places like the Inner Richmond, the Inner Sunset, and places south as well.
You didn't mention the Tenderloin or the Bayview.
Well, think about where the Tenderloin is. The Tenderloin is walking distance to Union Square, Financial District, and even Soma. So the Tenderloin is really not a transit hub, if you will, or places that people need to transit for to most of the major work centers, of course. It's also walking distance to BART stations where people can go to the East or South Bay. And Bayview Hunters Point, we're actually speaking with a few community activists down there and seeing how we can improve their transit experience as well.
Supervisor Wiener, do you think that there is some sort of obligation or social responsibility component here for these companies to look at a way to provide services in these lower income neighborhoods?
Actually, it's not the responsibility of private companies to provide good transportation in low-income neighborhoods. It's the responsibility of our public transportation systems to provide that service. And I think the minute we start saying we want private companies to fulfill our obligation in terms of equity for low-income, working-class neighborhoods, that would be a monumental failure. We need to make sure that Muni and BART and all of our systems are providing superb services everywhere they go. It is not acceptable that to get from the Bayview to downtown, say on the T, that it takes as long as it takes. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable how long it takes to get from the Outer Sunset downtown. And that is an obligation on us as government to make sure we're delivering those services.
I think many people would agree with what you're saying about what is the role of government and the responsibility of government. But as we saw in Scott Schaefer's piece earlier, and as you all know, there's been a lot of resentment over, say, the Google buses. And these services that you're providing, for example, seem like another symbol of that, the divide between the haves and the have-nots, that for $6 or $3 riding on these things, you can isolate yourself from the rest of San Francisco, from the homeless, from the elderly, from the disabled, people who don't necessarily have access to these services.
Well, one of the best part of my day is 7 in the morning when I jump on the Chariot service itself, and I meet waitresses like Jennifer who commute from the north end of town to her job at the Ferry Building, and she tells me privately that she doesn't make that much money, but the extra dollar is really worth spending because she can reliably and comfortably get to work stress-free on a very affordable budget. All the way, yes, up to CEOs and founders of company that take Chariot. One of our customers, Dylan, told me that he sold his car after 2 weeks of riding Chariot because we did prove to be reliable, and he didn't need the expense anymore of a fixed car payment, insurance, parking, vandalism, and parking tickets.
Clarrissa, so the benefits have been laid out. Do you have concerns, though, about that stratification, about how if you have more and more people using these services and being more isolated from the rest of San Francisco, for example, that perhaps they will feel like they have less of a stake in protecting the city's public transit system here in San Francisco or elsewhere, wherever these ride-sharing services spread?
So I did mention earlier that I think that there are people that can't afford to even not take public transit, right? So it isn't that in current society, without these private companies, that we wouldn't have that kind of isolation, social isolation from people that have lower incomes of you. But I think where, it's important to realize that there are people that could probably take that. I mean, Chariot's an example of one where it's open to the public. The Google buses, for example, are not necessarily open to the public. So there is that opportunity to see if it can work for the public. But the reality is that in the Bay Area, costs are skyrocketing. People are moving from San Francisco into the East Bay and displacing the families that have long been there to even further parts of the region. And our challenge is, are we going to have them drive back in because that's their only option? I think with the tech sector involved in trying to find mobility solutions, there might be something there. But unless it really understands, like, I've heard data that says one tech sector worker relies on 3 low-wage service workers. Where are those low-wage service workers going to live? Will they be able to afford living in the Bay Area? More and more people are spending more than half of their incomes on both housing and transportation. And that's the reality of what it means to live in such a desirable location.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Clarrissa, I just wanted to jump in. You mentioned the East Bay, and it's exciting that the board of directors at Bart actually reached out to Chariot, and we're discussing actually first mile and last mile solutions to BART stations. What's happening?
What does that mean?
What's happening is that people are actually opting to drive into San Francisco because they can't even find parking at BART stations. So they drive to the BART station a mile away from their home. They see the parking lot piled up and nowhere to park and ride, and so they end up getting on 80 and driving into the city. That's a lose-lose for everyone: the commuter and the community and all the other commuters as well. With Chariot, we're exploring solutions where we can solve that first mile solution, get that commuter to keep his car in the garage until Saturday morning, and take Chariot to the BART station and run loops around big BART or Caltrain centers, and on the other end of the city of the commute in San Francisco, doing a last mile solution for people as well. Again, the goal is having people keep their cars in their garage.
That's interesting. I want. We're talking about city-to-city transportation now, so that brings up the question of regulation. And Supervisor Wiener, this is a two-tiered question. Who is responsible for these services in San Francisco in terms of regulation? The California Public Utilities Commission told us it only has oversight for companies that operate from city to city, and so Chariot and LEAP don't do that yet. And the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency says it does not monitor ride-sharing agencies. So it seems like it's like this gray area where no one's in charge.
Well, as I understand it, ride-sharing in general is governed by state law, so that would be the CPUC. The MTA, the city really has no jurisdiction over them other than...
But the CPUC says if the organization exists only in one city and doesn't go from city to city, it's not responsible.
We'll certainly take a look at that. Someone has to be responsible. But what we've really seen is that state law is really, really far behind with a lot of these services. So, for example, Uber recently, and Lyft as well, and one other company started these carpooling services where you can call, and if they have someone in the area who's already going in a certain direction, they'll pick you up too. It's super cheap. It is incredibly affordable to do that, much more affordable than even a cab. And the CPUC ruled that it was illegal under state law. So you're trying to take a service and make it more affordable for people, and the state is saying the law is out of date. And so we need the state legislature to comprehensively address this, not by catering to some incumbents like some in the cab industry that want to destroy these services, but to actually conform law to the modern reality that we're facing and make sure that this kind of innovation can thrive.
And in fact, even the laws that we do have in place now for services like Uber and Lyft, the CPUC in that case was playing catch up. I mean, it wasn't until we had serious questions about insurance, for example, for Uber, that the CPUC started coming in, declared a whole new category for these companies called transportation network companies. So it seems like on a regulatory level, we're playing catch up.
Absolutely. And in fairness to our government agencies, this all happened fast. And it just sort of came on the scene. And so government is playing catch up. We have to make sure that these services, that there is a degree of oversight around insurance, around making sure that the drivers are well trained, making sure that there are consumer protections in place. That's very, very important. And that is happening, and I think it will happen.
Ali, who is responsible for conducting background checks at Chariot? Do you conduct them? And do your drivers have insurance?
Yes, we do. So we do thorough background checks. We do extensive driver training. We have, and so the second part of your question, I'm sorry?
Do your drivers have insurance?
Okay, so we have actually commercial grade insurance with Chariot. So all of our passengers have, as well as the vehicle, have twice the state limit, or twice the state minimum, excuse me, of vehicle insurance. And our drivers are actually insured by workers' comp. Another interesting thing that people don't know about Chariot is that our drivers are actually W-2 employees. Chariot is paying payroll taxes towards the city and the state in employing, now we have about 60 full-time and part-time drivers. So we're not playing this 1099 charade of hide the P, but
they're not your contractors.
They're not our
actual employees.
They're actual employees, and our retention rate is super high because they really enjoy what they're doing, and they know that they're contributing to a larger cause of better transit in the city.
Clarrissa, I want to ask you this. Transportation is a region-wide issue. You've all talked about that. To what extent do you think private companies like Chariot, like Leap, provide a solution? And what more would you like to see from them?
So I think that their existence is kind of telling that they are providing some form of a solution, right? That there are people that choose to take that rather than our traditional public transit system, or driving, or Uber, for example, or a taxi, for example, to work. I think that where we're increasingly seeing a lot of complementary service, that's something that I would really encourage Chariot and Leap and Lyft and all the different new providers of transportation service to work with the government. I heard a stat that said about 22% of Lyft rides are going to Caltrain, and that there are hot spots around BART stations. That tells me that there's some kind of symbiotic relationship that should be mined if we are regionally trying to get people to drive less. And the reality is that people often only can drive. I mean, in San Francisco, you might have a multiplicity of options, but along the peninsula, there's less kind of transportation service. So I think we're dealing with the reality of our built environment and what options you do have out there. So I think that people do need options, and if we can make them more affordable and speak to their needs a little bit more,
And just real quickly, I mean, this seems like it's just the beginning. 10 years from now, what do you think transit will look like in the Bay Area?
And I think that Clarissa's point is a really, really important one. When you look at the reality of our systems, Bart hit 400,000 daily riders a decade before they projected. Caltrain's gone from 35,000 a day to 61,000 a day in just a few years. Muni is through the roof. People can't get on these vehicles. So it's not like people are saying, oh, I don't feel like taking Muni anymore. A lot of times, and the 30X is part of, you can't even get on the bus. So 10 years from now, I know what it has to look like. We need dramatically more service. We need more BART vehicles. We need a second Transbay 2, more Muni vehicles. We need to significantly expand capacity.
And all of that is going to take money. All right. Thank you all for being here. Supervisor Scott Wiener, also Ali Vahabzadeh with Chariot, and Clarrissa Cabansagan with Transform. Thank you all. Thank you. And now let's go to Scott Schaefer with an update on two stories we've been covering.
On last week's show, I asked the head of the State Water Board, Felicia Marcus, why the state hasn't imposed mandatory rationing.
And our goal has been to leverage more action at the local level, not to stand in the shoes of thousands of local water agencies to make decisions. What we've been trying to do is to make clear that there are certain things that aren't okay, and that certain things go to the level of being wasteful and unreasonable.
What, for example?
Like watering your lawn so much that it runs off into the street.
What's the penalty for that, though? Well, yesterday, KQED's politics and government editor John Myers asked Governor Jerry Brown the same question.
And so I'm going to talk to some of the members of the Water Board and ask them that very question. But I do think they know what they're doing, and they're trying to do the best they can, and we're going to do more. Don't worry. If this drought continues, we'll crank it down, and it will get extremely challenging for people in California, and in some places far more challenging than in other places.
The governor made his remarks at a bipartisan press conference with leaders of the state legislature. They unveiled a plan to help communities hit hard by the drought and to make it easier for the state to buy water. And finally, last month, we interviewed Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, who was part of our panel with the mayors of San Francisco and San Jose. In that interview, Schaaf used a phrase that has generated some unusual interest.
You know, I love talking about the idea that Oakland can grow without selling its soul. That we have a secret sauce in Oakland. It's our diversity, our artists, our gritty industrial flavor, even our birthplace for social movements.
Recently, someone actually filed a public records request with the city of Oakland, asking for all documents relating to the ingredients and manufacture of Oakland's secret sauce. The city has not yet responded to that request. Now, we believe the ingredients include chipotle and garlic, but we haven't confirmed that yet. That is our show for tonight. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org. I'm Scott Schaefer. Thanks for joining us.